good afternoon. It's almost a good evening. Or as one of the guys on The Big Bang would say, prevening. We're in a tween space as far as he's concerned. And to be quite honest with you, my last 2 days have been in a tween space, more or less. We've been talking about connections and talking about the connections that are more metaphysical rather than physical. And it's one of those things that when we understand it, I'm just turning that phone off that shouldn't be on, but I know why it's on now. It works really well. The other kind of meta connection that we have at the moment is with the internet. And I've been having fun with a certain company who collect money for you. And they have the initials PP. And the long and the short of it is that they decided that I had to give them some more information, which I was ready to comply with. However, that's where connections started to break down. I don't really speak website that well. There tends to be a slight communication problem between us both. They tend to be thinking one thing and I'm trying to get them to say another, and I'm sure you know that situation. And we have spoken about this earlier on, about how what you're saying, what you're trying to put over, is not being taken in by the other person. And that's because they're thinking their own thoughts. They're putting it into couching it in their terms. Now, as far as they're concerned, you should know exactly what you're doing because you're on a computer. What they don't take into consideration is that there are some people on computers, comme moi, who when they went to school, they started off with chalk and slate. And computers, in the house particularly, were a brand new invention, and they didn't come in until the 80s. Really, end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. And then they were rather large contraptions with things called floppy disks that weren't really floppy. But let's not go into that. 4 days now I've been batting and battling verbally. Well, actually messaging them, because I have to deal with chatbots, which to me is an insult, really. Because if you say you're going to have customer service, then you should be able to speak to a human being. I get on quite well speaking to the machine, but speaking to code is something entirely different. So my connections were a little bit squiffy this week. And this morning it really went Genghis Khan in a very bad mood. Squiffy. Yeah. Somebody who was supposed to phone me last night didn't phone me last night, but they phoned me this morning, well, nearly lunchtime. And was surprised to find that I wasn't actually finding it a convenient time to be dropping everything and doing what they wanted me to do. Which then allowed me to connect to a part of me that rarely comes out these days, but which has been waiting in the wings, rubbing its hands, going, oh, here we go, this is my shot, this is my time, I'm gonna get to go out and I'm gonna get to be that voice. I'm going to get to be that assertive energy. And yes, there is a difference between the assertive and the aggressive. There are a lot of men who don't understand that when it comes to women. And I must admit, I did push the envelope slightly, but stayed in the assertive zone. And I actually was found to be repeating what my husband says, quoting my husband and saying to the man, why are you speaking to me from a script? Why don't you just have a conversation with me? I'm asking you to understand that I cannot stop what I'm doing at the moment because I'm cooking something and it's a very vital stage. And if I stop at the moment, it will congeal and will be inedible, and then I'll have to start again. All I got from him was that I wasn't complying. It was very robot talk. Non-compliant. And then I started to feel slightly patronised. And I thought, basically, he's giving me timeouts. He was switching off for about 30 seconds at a time and giving me timeouts. But what he didn't realise was that I can play that game too. And I enjoyed connecting to that part of me this morning. In a strange way, it was venting some stuff. And it's understandable that, he's not really taking into account the feelings and frustrations of someone who has been trying to get someone to phone them, being told that they're going to phone them within a certain time frame, and then it doesn't happen. Especially someone who's used to being on the other side and having to do the phone calling and making sure that it is done at the time it said it's going to be done. So I had a real life intrusion moment this morning. And it was a real lesson in the fact that these things are still all there. It doesn't matter how many times we connect and we reach our higher selves and we go into the things. It's all still there. The levels are still there. It's how we approach them and how we get through them and how we get round them and over them that is the main situation, the main way of dealing with it. And then not really beating ourselves up about it. Sometimes it's good to be able to say in a voice that commands the idea that you're not going to be listening to any little mollifications or whatever, that platitudes that are just thrown out there like seeds on a grassland plain. Sometimes it's good to be able to do that, because there are some people who will push your buttons a little bit by trying to make you feel, or just not caring enough to understand that they've got another human being on the other side of the phone. One who's upset, perhaps. I used to deal with it a lot in the veterinary practices. Usually about bills, but sometimes, just sometimes, because communication hadn't gone through as far as what the owner thought was going on with the animal and what the vet or the nurse had told the owner they thought they should know. Again, many a slip, best laid plans, etc. Communication is all about what you hear, not about what you say. So, connection is also that way. It's about what you're listening to, what you're listening for. It's about your expectations. It's about understanding that the connection on the other end might not be understanding that you're wanting to really have that connection. What it is you're saying and how you're saying it might be allowing that connection to go, yeah, maybe I don't want to do that today because, I don't think you're in the right space for that. It gets good when we can actually say, maybe I'm not in the right space for this. Perhaps I should just change it around a little bit. Perhaps I should take a step back, have a cup of tea, have a drink of water, change my perspective. Well, I jumped right from the frying pan into the fire this morning because my perspective change was when I was looking for a headset that I thought I knew where it was, but the Minutemen had it. So I found myself standing in the middle of the room, connecting to the Minutemen. You know those men. 1 minute it's there, the next minute it's gone. That's the Minutemen. I'm standing in the middle of the room and I'm demanding, bring me this headset. I need this headset now. And sometimes that works. It's more or less, for me, a case of saying to myself, where did you put this? You must have put this somewhere really interesting. But then when we found it, it was actually in a place where it wasn't a couple of days ago. Because a couple of days ago, I'd been there, in that place, and I'd had everything off that chair. And yet there they were, tucked down the back of the chair. Not deep in the back, just placed behind a book. Minutemen. So yeah, it's good to stand your ground. Sometimes you have to take a little step back or a little step forward. It is a bit of a dance. Connection can be something that is akin to communication. You need both of them, but not necessarily both at the same time. Making a connection doesn't always need speech, doesn't always need the verbal assault, if you like. However, the verbalization will colour that connection for the other end of it. It's very easy to become irate when someone on the other end of the phone or on a message is not getting what you're saying, or obviously just not wanting to get what you're saying. And the thing to remember is that they're coming from a different place entirely. This is what I had to remember this morning. They may be coming from a different culture. They may be coming from a different... Nick yesterday was from Holland. And, it's a case of, okay, how do the Dutch deal with this? How do they get in and out of the things? And I know a few Dutch people, so I know that there's a slight difference. And I know some in France it's slightly different because English is the second language. So their translation of what you're saying, particularly when you're saying it in a Scottish accent, can be fun. So communication is never straightforward, even when it's two of the same culture talking. Because I can talk to someone from another part of Glasgow and not understand a word they're saying. Because they have different patois to me. I can talk to someone from the Shetlands who speaks Doric, Scots Gaelic, and it's beautiful to hear. But there are amazing words in there that have power, that have energy, and I feel a kind of heartstringy connection to. I don't quite get the whole lot of them all the time. Communication and connection. Thinking about it all the time now. But thinking about it is one thing. Noticing and appreciating how it's working is another. When we speak to people who are of different beliefs, we can get locked in a spiral of mine's is better than yours if we're not careful. When all we have to remember is that everything is energy and source is source, whatever you call it. It's the dogma that actually gets its teeth stuck into things. And we can all be a little bit dogmatic at times. Don't like it, but I know I do it. And I do it sometimes to myself, which is never good. So when you're connecting and you're understanding about communication, think about that as well. Be nice to yourself. When you're talking to yourself and you're saying, oh, why does it always go wrong for me? This isn't right. What am I doing? Why am I here? What's going, These may be questions that it would be good to actually sit down and have a little think about in a quieter moment. And then answer it with your best will in mind, with your best outcome in mind. Because actually we're always where we need to be to learn what we need to learn, to meet who we need to meet, to find out what we need to find out. It can be hard to believe sometimes, and you can butt your head up against it as much as you like, but when you look back on things, you will always, I believe, find a reason for being in that situation. And if you can connect to that, you'll go forward much easier. Every time you come out of flow, it can be like being in a whirlpool. But you can get back in it again. Just have to allow yourself to go there. You know where you want to be. You know how you want to be there. Make it happen. It can be that simple. It's perspective. It's the way you're thinking. And it's understanding that although you may have the initial, oh, don't like that, you can't speak to me that way, you can't do this to me, you can't, you shouldn't. You can actually say, okay, go and have a cup of tea, have a breath before you deal with that. And if you get caught on the hop and you allow yourself, as I did this morning, to become a little bit assertive, then perhaps you might be feeling that you need to be a little bit more empowered. And it's just not quite sorted yet. Because I'm thinking that that's quite possibly what was going on with me. I was feeling less than empowered, caught off guard, not ready. And for a Capricorn, that can be, quite upsetting. But still, it's sorted so far as I know. And now I've had my cup of tea and I've settled down and I'm speaking to you quite calmly and fessing up. I'm human and I go there. We'll have some fun with it tomorrow, shall we? What are you going to fess up to today? How have things been with you when you're getting what you don't want? Have you had any trouble with the Minutemen? Or the Fae? Losing keys? Losing little things and then finding them in the strangest places where you know they really weren't before. Let me know. It's all part of the rich tapestry of our lives when we start to connect
there is a little bit of to and froing. It is a dance. And we sometimes have to relearn the steps. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow.